Welcome back to the E30 Project.
In this episode, we will replace the timing belt, tensioner, rollers, accessory belt, water pump and thermostat. As this is my first time changing the timing belt, I did things in a little bit of a jumbled order, and I was trying to avoid doing some things. But I've edited this video to show you a logical sequence that you can follow along. So the first thing you should do is to take off the bonnet or the hood. There are 6 bolts to the front of the bonnet. You need to loosen them all, and you can take out the pairs that are on the outsides. Disconnect the wiper fluid hose, and now you can slide the bonnet off the remaining bolts and lift it off the car. Now you have good access to the front of the engine. I removed the hood later in the process, so I've already removed some of the parts. Disconnect the battery and make sure it can't short circuit. Next, you want to remove the fan shroud. It's held together by 2 plastic tabs at the top. In my case, one side was with a zip tie. Then you lift the shroud off. But the fit is really tight, so you just kind of squish it past the fan. Now you can remove the fan by undoing one nut. And this nut goes in the opposite direction, so clockwise to loosen. Now you can remove the bottom cowl by removing these bolts, this bolt, and some bolts at the bottom. Now we will loosen the 2 bolts that tighten the power steering pump. And then there's another bolt that will walk the pump forwards and loosen the belt. And then the belt can be removed. The next belt is for the air conditioning compressor. You need to loosen 2 of these bolts and loosen the middle one a lot. That lets you twist the AC compressor downwards, which will loosen the belt and let you remove it. The last accessory belt is for the water pump and alternator. This works pretty much the same way as the power steering pump. So loosen the bolt that it pivots around, loosen the bolt that tightens the tensioning bolt, and you can walk the tensioning bolt forwards, loosening the belt. I recommend that you loosen the 4 bolts on the water pump pulley before removing the belt, as the belt will help you keep the pulley in place while you loosen the bolts. Then the pulley just pulls off. Before you remove the water pump, it will be good to drain the coolant, just so the water pump doesn't make a mess. So just pull the 2 hoses at the ends of the radiator. Make sure you have a bucket to collect all the coolant coming out. Coolant is highly toxic, so make sure it's out of reach of your pets. This coolant obviously hasn't been changed in a long time, so in the next episode I'll be doing a radiator flush. Now it's time to remove the water pump. The 4 bolts holding the pump to the block come off easily enough. But that's where the nightmare starts. After removing the bolts, I found that the water pump was stuck tight. No problem. BMW supplies 2 extra bolt holes so that you can use 2 bolts to try and push the water pump out. But all that does is break the water pump housing. So now I'm trying to tap the water pump loose, left, right, but it's still stuck just the same. Then I got a big pair of pliers, try and twist it open. No luck with that, so I went and bought a bigger pair of pliers. Which brings us to the second broken piece of the water pump housing. I tried using bigger bolts in the 4 mounting holes this time, but we know the housing is soft, so this didn't work. I did try using penetrating oil as well, but it made absolutely no difference. Here's what the water pump looks like now. It gets worse. Next, I tried to pry the water pump outwards since I've been doing twisting motion so far, but the radiator is in the way, so out goes the radiator. And now we can try doing some prying. Heave! No luck, but there's a little bit of an opening there. So I tried jamming a chisel into it and tried to pry it apart with the chisel. More broken pieces. You should definitely remove your water pump before removing any of the timing covers. As you can see, I've begun to resort to extreme violence. But lo and behold, it works. So we're going to smash it some more. Smash, chisel, try it from a few directions, and we're getting some good promising progress. You can see water is starting to come out. That's the coolant. That means your water pump is definitely coming off. So give it a few more whacks with the hammer and you can pull it right out. A visual inspection of the water pump shows that it's broken. Not sure if I cracked it or if it was already cracked before. After cleaning up all the bits of broken water pump, you can move on to removing the distributor. Next item on the list, remove the thermostat housing and pop out the thermostat with a flathead screwdriver. You can see I've got a lot of mineral deposits from the old coolant/water. Next, you can remove the vibration damper or crankshaft sprocket. You'll need a big wrench to hold the crankshaft in place so that you can loosen the bolts. You can't see where the bolts are from the side, so it's a bit tricky, but there are 6 of them. With the vibration damper removed, you can remove the timing covers. So just remove the bolts all around, and you can remove both the top and bottom covers. Before removing the timing belt, you must make sure that you lock the camshaft and the crankshaft in place so that the timing doesn't go off. I've already removed the bolts on this valve cover because now is a perfect time to check that your oil spray bar is working fine. There will be a video on that next. Subscribe to my channel for it. With the valve cover off, you can remove this secondary valve cover. And looking at the end of the crankshaft, there's a square section. This square section has a marker to tell you when the first cylinder is at top dead center. So just get the big wrench out and turn the crankshaft. If you didn't remove the spark plugs like me, then you'll have to do the compression stroke with your own elbow grease. Now you see there's 2 round dots at either side of this side of the square. That tells you are at top dead center, roughly. Then you have to move on to the flywheel. The flywheel is what locks the crankshaft in place. So all the way down here at the bottom of the engine, towards the gearbox, there is a little hole. A hole for the locking tool. So if you're looking at the engine from the front left side, the hole will be about there. BMW makes a special locking tool for this. But in keeping with the porch garage spirit of this channel, I do not have that special tool. I will use a drill bit to lock my crankshaft. Just to make sure the crankshaft is really locked into place, make sure you try to turn over the crankshaft using that wrench. And since I'm not using the BMW locking tool, there's a little bit of play in the crankshaft still, but a quick check shows that the play is not significant enough that the timing belt could be in the wrong position. And now to lock the camshaft, just find something flat that will sit right up against the side of that square, and that will lock the camshaft into place, as long as this thing doesn't fall off. And now we can remove the timing belt. It's pretty simple. Just loosen the nut on the tensioning roller. You see the tensioning roller spring back, and you can just remove the timing belt. I'm also replacing all the rollers, so just undo the bolt there, remove the roller, undo the bolt at the bottom, remove the roller, and the tensioning roller comes off with a nut. And I'm taking the opportunity to clean this off. I'm not sure how some engine oil got in there. Just spray on some degreaser, wash it off with water, brush it if you need to. And because I was hammering the water pump with the timing covers off, which I do not recommend you do, the broken bits of the water pump, I had to make sure I got all of it off. I found a small piece here wedged between the block and the harmonic balancer mount. It would have been disastrous if I started the engine with this wedged in there. Now that we're finally done with the disassembly, take the opportunity, clean off all the parts, make sure they're good as new before you put them back on. And while you've been disassembling the parts, I hope that you've been keeping the bolts, nuts and washers well organized. Before putting the new parts on, just compare them to the old ones so you know that you've definitely got the right parts. Reassembly starts with the tensioning sprocket, which goes on finger tight with a nut, followed by one of the rollers and the second roller. Now you can put the belt on. Make sure you snake it through the rollers the same way it came off. To tension the timing belt, insert an Allen key with a marker at the 85mm mark. Then using a luggage scale, pull the Allen key until it reaches 2 kilograms and tighten the tensioning sprocket. Tighten the two rollers as well. Now you can remove the camshaft lock and the crankshaft lock. Turn the engine over a few times, and if you didn't hear your valves hitting the pistons, everything is good. The top timing cover goes on with just a few bolts, so just put it on, tighten all the bolts. But the bottom timing cover needs a new gasket. For some reason, the gasket can't be found anywhere, so it's time to make the world's ugliest gasket using Gasket Maker. It's actually really difficult to make this gasket because the original gasket is really thick, and you need a few layers of this gasket maker to make up the distance. Anyway, I don't think engine oil is supposed to come gushing out of the timing belt, so I wasn't too bothered by the lousy job I did. Anyway, lessons learned: don't destroy the old part until you're sure that the new part you bought is actually the correct part. The water pump was actually really easy to install for how difficult it was to remove. Just slip on the O-ring and you can slide it into the block. And you have to tighten the 4 bolts alternately, and that will walk the water pump into the block. The thermostat is next, and there's a little arrow on the thermostat pointing, I'm not sure, up or down. But the other side of the thermostat is a little hole, and I think this is to bleed the air out of the cooling system. So presumably the hole will be on top, and the arrow points where the coolant will flow, which is towards the water pump. The thermostat is held in place by the thermostat housing, which needs to go on before the distributor, not how I'm doing it now. After the thermostat housing goes on, then you can put on the distributor and tighten it. The vibration damper and pulleys should go on pretty easily, unless you're like me and you read the wrong torque specs and you break one of the bolts. So now I have 1 broken bolt and probably 5 other stretched bolts, which means I am probably one of the few people who can tell you for sure that the vibration damper bolts are M8 16mm bolts, just in case you need to buy some replacements. So let's try this again. The vibration damper has a locating hole that goes onto a dowel, but the dowel isn't long enough to go through the vibration damper and into the corresponding hole on the pulleys. So you have to either get a camera down there or just feel around, but it's difficult. Anyway, you'll get all 6 bolts in eventually and just torque them up to spec, the right spec. The accessory belts really just go on the reverse way they came off, so I won't show you that. But for the fan and fan shroud, I found it much easier to slip the fan on before tightening the fan shroud, otherwise there's not enough room. Then to tighten the fan, remember it's the opposite direction, so counterclockwise to tighten. And that is all the new belts and rollers installed. In the next episode, I will be checking and replacing the oil spray bar for the camshaft, fixing the engine oil leak from the oil pan, replacing the engine oil filter, adding new engine oil and coolant, and testing to see how well it all works. Subscribe to the channel to be notified of new updates. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Bye!